Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back with another video from the Salad Bar, and today we're checking out the truth about Thragg versus Dragon Ball. I think that's the title. Yeah, the truth about Thragg versus Dragon Ball. Now, I think this is interesting because Seth did a video with Chuck, and I didn't really vibe with it. And then a guy called Easy did a debunk, and I was just like, do you know what? Yeah, I agreed with the debunk. And now the salad bar's gone done this, so I'm intrigued to. I'm really hoping that this is going to be on the same kind of side of easy, where like the Dragon Ball side like stomps the Invincible side. So I think this is covering because I think the titles changed. I remember it being like the Saiyan Saga yesterday. Um, I still think like Thrag don't got this. Let's see where we go with this.
Thragg from Invincible versus Dragon Ball. I have seen countless people discussing Invincible characters with Dragon Ball characters, but more than anything, there's a focus on Thragg, in particular pitting him
Oh, he's
against
the
the Saiyans,
strongest one,
a
isn't
lot
he?
of times
So.
against the Saiyan Saga. I know, having these two series fight each other has been done to death. I've made similar videos too, but now it's getting out of hand. There's so much misinformation that people are just running with, for both series. And this might sound ridiculous to say, but I think there's been a lot of lowball for both. So let's cover that here. We're basically
Okay.
going to scale four things. We're going to scale TV Thragg as of Season 4 and comic Thragg. The TV show has a clearly separate scaling and story, even though it does follow a
I
lot of
mean,
the comics. So this isn't...
I say I don't really think it has a scaling at all. I don't think Invincible has a scaling in its whole existence. I'm pretty sure the creator even said that he never really focused on like that. But anyway.
important distinction. Even though Thragg doesn't have as many feats in the TV show and it's not that far along, the show does make characters stronger, so it is worth covering both.
Okay.
And for Dragon Ball, we're basically doing the same thing. We're going to cover the manga and the Toei version with the anime. We could set a baseline and go over how strong each character is both in the Raditz part of the Saiyan Saga, as well as the Vegeta part of the Saiyan Saga. Instead of scaling any one individual character here, we kind of just want to see like who the weakest is, and who Thragg could even compete with, if anyone. Also, before I
That makes me think that we are going in the direction I'm hoping. Like, if he can, yeah.
begin, the script got kind of out of control. I intended for this to be a shorter video, but I ended up going way deeper into each verse than I thought, so I don't think I even get to cover everything I'd want to in this video.
Damn.
If you want me to do a separate, more in-depth video for each series, let me know. I'm kind of tempted to do a Thragg glazing video, but also one explaining how Dragon Ball is a lot stronger than people realize, which is kind of crazy because I already know that series gets glazed a lot. In
Yeah.
order to keep this video more brief, I ended up sourcing calculations from other people because of how many I need here and how dense the video already is. They'll be linked in the description below so their work can be properly credited and so you can see a breakdown. Had I done this all on my own, this video would have been probably like 3 times as long. But
Okay, one quick second then, before we do this. I was kind of worried that it was going to be like using clips from other people's videos, like Seth's and Easy's, but okay, we're good. We're good. We're good. Let's go.
if you ever do want to see a video with a breakdown like that, let me know. In that instance, I'd have more time to spend calculating these on my own. So, big thanks to everyone who I'll be linking below. Let's start with TV Thragg. Beginning with speed. Speed in Invincible's weird, but here's the consensus. On planets, these characters move a lot slower than in space. Same for when they're kind of close to planets. On planets specifically, it's more like massively hypersonic because
Okay.
otherwise they're just obliterating everything around them, and they also face various resistances, preventing them from flying as fast as they can.
Like
But in
air
space,
pressure,
they
okay,
can
it's
reach
like that.
massively faster than light speeds, but only after accelerating. It's not something they can do instantly.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's the wind up, it's the build up, yeah.
The reaction and combat speeds are what's weird though, because despite that travel speed, various Viltrumite characters have been shown to get hit by or not even attempt to dodge attacks from other superhumans, ones who are far weaker and far slower than them. It's so weirdly inconsistent, but Dragon Ball has its own inconsistencies too. For what it's worth though, Invincible's speed scaling seems far more inconsistent. But since Thragg is the best of the best, let's ignore these anti-feats and focus on the bigger stuff because their maximum speeds do occur pretty often still. In short, Thragg is massively faster than light in all speeds: combat, reaction, and travel.
Okay.
It seems like, weirdly enough, the reaction and combat speeds change based on whatever scene they're in, and I don't get it, dude, but whatever. And in case it wasn't already clear, with that type of speed, Dragon Ball is going to be heavily outsped by Thragg. At least with the point of the series that we're covering here. But what about Thragg's power in this show?
Okay.
Well, he doesn't have many feats in the show so far, but he is the top dog, so pretty much anything we see in the show is fair game. Everything is a Thragg upscale, which is awesome. First off, let's start easy.
Right.
The one that's pretty generally agreed upon and has been discussed to death. Nolan, Mark, and Thetis destroying Viltrum. With help from Space Razor's gun, of course.
Right.
The core was
Thank
destabilized,
God he's mentioned that.
and with the three of them flying into it, they blew up Viltrum, which is a
So annoying when people use this and they don't even mention that like Space Racer helped, and it's like, okay, cool.
slightly larger planet than Earth. This is pretty generally agreed upon to be a small planetary feat for each of them because the kinetic energy they'd each have to exert is a small planet's worth of energy. And with how strong Thragg is, he could do this alone. But this feat actually doesn't upscale him too much because even their combined kinetic energy that they exert is still small planetary. This is the most solid feat in the story, but also it's not the strongest by far. I have seen people calc this feat to being higher, but it's much more solid and agreed upon to be small planetary.
Okay.
But how do we scale Thragg beyond this because small planetary is too weak for him? Well, in the show, we also have Nolan moving a planet. We don't actually see this happen, but Nolan states he moved a planet closer to its sun, causing all the water to evaporate. At first, you might think this is tough to take at face value.
Yeah.
I remember people saying that it was done through unknown means, and we don't know how much time it took. But there was a direct quote from Robert Kirkman that says Nolan actually did move this planet.
Right.
They didn't use any tech, he didn't get any help, none of that. Nolan moved this planet alone. Although, in this same quote, Kirkman does say that Nolan can be Superman, so yeah, take that as it is. It's funny, I actually dropped a recent Invincible video, like, around the time that this episode aired, so that video pretty much immediately became outdated, but there's also more feats I should have covered there, which I will cover here. Anyways, to move this planet, Nolan likely would have had to do it in a short time frame. Here are two good calcs I found from Fusion Prime Zero and Sackfire, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Now, here's a theme you're going to see in this video. Just because they're doing a feat on a planet doesn't mean the feat automatically scales to that planet. Like, destroying a planet doesn't mean you're just planetary. You could very well be beyond that. Same goes for moving a planet.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's like, could be stronger. Just be- how do I word this? Like, I think that was perfectly explained. Just because Frieza can blow up the planet, we know he could do more. So, he is not planetary. He is bigger than that. Okay.
Especially in a shorter time frame, you're not going to be putting a planet's worth of energy in it. You're probably going to be putting a lot more into it. So in a much shorter time frame, you're getting like small star level for moving this planet. And even though that's a high ball, it's still pretty insane that we could even get that high here. That is a huge upscale. But in a more reasonable estimate, you are actually more like small planetary to planetary, which is actually pretty consistent. Nice. Let's go with planetary here, since this feat is very impressive and being in the planetary range isn't too crazy, nor is it too conservative. But then we have another feat, the Sun Disk. This is something more contentious, and I get why people find it contentious. Let's cover it. What even is the Sun Disk? I think I've alluded to it in every Invincible video I've done, but never discussed it. Sorry, I have a bad habit of mentioning things in videos, assuming people know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm guessing that if you're an Invincible fan, you know what this is. This actually became a lot more discussed recently because it was brought up in a Death Battle video, and I don't watch Death Battle, or any other power scaling videos for that matter. But what I do know is that this is what brought the feat into the spotlight. Even though it's sort of ignored in scaling communities for a few reasons, I'm covering it here to give Thragg everything I can find. So the Viltrumites built this giant disk to block out the sun on the Ragnar's planet, and this disk is destroyed by a weapon from the Coalition of Planets. And the Viltrumites scale above this weapon because the Coalition of Planets says they have no means of actually killing Viltrumites just with their own power. So naturally that should include this weapon, otherwise these weapons would be able to wipe out the Viltrumites with ease.
Right.
Also, the disk is pretty fucking huge, so that makes the feat even more impressive. The scaling for this is a bit dodgier though because it relies a lot on pixel scaling and interpretations because nobody knows what material
Fucking hate pixel scaling, man. Pixel scaling is so dumb.
the sun disk is made of. Nobody knows the density of it. Nobody knows how strong it truly is, and there's no way to tell exactly how big it is. Sure, we're able to get estimates, but that's the best we got. I personally only like to use calcs when I know I can get something concrete, even if we have to go with a range, so that's what I'm going to do here. Let's go with a range, looking at what various people have calc this to be. And I've seen a pretty wide range of calcs for this. I've even seen some people saying it could be moon level on the lower end, all the way up to large star level on
That's
the
why it's really pixel scaling. It's like, do you really think they drew it with the intention of that? It's like when people use Naruto's pixel scaling, they're like, well then that paddle is there and this paddle is here, so we must have moved that fast because if you measure with a ruler from this side, oh fuck off. It's like there's no way the person that drew it and wrote it actually did it with such detail to show how like actually mathematically fast they've gone. Ugh.
High end. And remember, wherever the destruction of the sun disk scales, the Viltrumite scale beyond that, and then Thragg scales beyond that. So if this feat were actually like large star level, that's pushing Thragg to like the high end of large star tier, possibly into solar system tier. So yeah, huge upscale.
Okay.
But then if it's something like moon level, it's not going to upscale everyone very much. Also, the other problem is the validity of this feat. It is inconsistent with the Viltrum busting feat that happens only a few chapters and episodes later. Plus, when the Coalition is said to lack the means of killing Viltrumites, that doesn't necessarily mean they lack the attack power to do so. Remember, Viltrumites are pretty fucking fast.
Yeah.
So, what's a gun gonna do against them if they're moving like massively faster than light? Like, look at Space Racer. We know his gun can kill Viltrumites, but it's hard when you're fighting massively faster
Yeah,
than
it's like
dudes in the
if
vacuum
it
space,
hits, yeah.
no matter how good your aim is or how strong your weapon is. And imagine doing that with a giant ship, or worse, doing that with a giant ship on a planet full of people being attacked. Also, like, this is some random ass ship and it has star level missiles. There's a lot of ways to ignore this feat, and that's why it is widely ignored. And besides the inconsistent scaling with this feat too, another thing to mention is that in the show, it is depicted a bit differently than in the comic. From the comic, people assume that the weapon was like a one-shot laser that destroyed it. But in the show, it's two missiles that hit the sun disk, and it looks to be destroyed via a chain reaction. So again, there's just so many variables here and so many inconsistencies that it's really hard to place this as a solid feat. And I actually don't have too much of a problem with the sun disk feat. I think it's just ranked too high sometimes. It does work as a good high end though, and if we still want to use it in this video, let's assume it's valid but take it at the lower end of its calcs.
Okay.
And once more we see the lower end of the median actually falling to more like small planetary to even planetary range here, which again, pretty consistent with the Viltrum destruction that we saw before. And the feat is relatively similar between both stories, it's just that in the show we obviously get a much clearer view of it because it's in motion and we see the actual weapons that destroy it. So let's assume that these weapons are like small planetary and that upscales the Viltrumites to at least planetary. I think it's pretty fair if we cut it basically right in the middle by doing that.
Okay.
Frankly, I think the planet moving is a much more solid feat, especially because we actually see something similar in a crossover comic that I'm going to cover in a bit. And another thing to address here, I know invincible scaling can seem inconsistent at times, but that kind of
Very
happens with
much
like every
so.
comic, and I don't think we should just write off everything as an outlier or an anti-feat though. Anyways, using those three big feats, because the show is still relatively early on in the story and we haven't seen much of Thragg yet, these all serve as good Thragg upscales. We obviously can't calculate exactly how much stronger he is than everyone, but it's a decent enough gap to say that he's multiple times stronger than the strongest Viltrumites. That
Yeah.
places the other Viltrumites to like the high end of small planetary or the low end of planetary, which puts Thragg at comfortably planetary, and that's more in the low ball range. Highballing him, he'd be more at like the dwarf star level, towards the higher end of that. So bottom line, let's keep things simple and cut it in the middle. Let's go with Thragg in the show being large planetary, massively faster than light. It'll be interesting to see in a few seasons how strong he truly is, because again, the comics clearly have different scaling from the show. So, speaking of the comics, what happens there? Well, there's going to be some spoilers for this section ahead, and we don't really need to cover speed, it's
That's
largely
fine.
the same here. Also, we know Viltrumites fire outspeed characters from Dragon Ball at this
I've watched plenty of videos of Chuck upscaling invisible characters, and I've had things spoiled there, so there's no difference here.
point, so there's not much more we need to cover anyways. The power is where things get interesting and a lot different from the show. Well, surprisingly enough, power might be a little bit weaker in the comics. The weird thing is, Thragg in the comics obviously has more feats to go off of, but the most impressive feats kinda already did happen in the show too. Because, first off, the Sundisk feat, that happened already. And that's kind of the craziest thing in the comics when it comes to highballs. Viltrumites have been stated multiple times to have planet-busting power, and when we saw Viltrum blow up, we actually saw that happen, so Thragg in the comics definitely is bare minimum planetary still. However, the show does have the feat of Nolan moving that planet, which doesn't happen in the comic. Now, there is a crossover comic where Mark and the Tick
The
move
Tick?
one of Mars's moons onto the planet, and this one is actually canon
Cool.
in the comic, as Mark does reference it later on, and it's confirmed to be the same Mark here. So this is the closest thing we have to that planet-moving feat, and depending on which of Mars's moons
That's
this
so
was,
cool.
and the speed at which it collided with Mars, this could be as low as multi-continental, or as high as large planetary. The high end assumes that this is the larger moon, Deimos, and only takes 5 seconds. Assuming it's Phobos, the smaller moon, and we measure this by kinetic energy, that does give us planetary power still, so impressive, but not much crazier than the Viltrum busting feat we already saw, nor is it crazier than Nolan moving a planet, but it also is a consistent feat. Here I'm using a calc from Fusion Prime Zero on Versus Battle Wiki. And trust me, I'm aware of the other metas that happen in the comic too, like, people say Tech Jacket is galaxy level because of what happens in his own story, but that's kind of taken completely out of context. Or some people argue that Tech Jacket's like star level because there is a panel of him throwing a ship, and if you measure the explosion on the star, You could rank this to being star level, but I don't really like using pixel scaling for faraway explosions. It's not really that reliable in my opinion. But it's kind of funny that Tech
That's
Jack and
so
lasers go
funny.
this low. I respect it. Or people refer to Omnipotus being potentially multiversal at his maximum, upscaling everyone, though it's pretty dubious to use this because of how inconsistent Omnipotus's power is and how much of a range he has in power. And yes, I see this picture too where people say Brit's taser is, like, stupidly strong, because his taser apparently has the power of lightning times the power of 10. And this picture interprets it as the energy of lightning to the power of 10, exponential. When actually, it definitely seems more like he's saying this taser is 10 times stronger than lightning, not lightning to the power of 10.
Huh.
He just phrases it in a really strange way. Lightning times 10 means it's actually a city block level taser, which still pretty impressive for a taser, but if anything, this actually isn't that impressive. And why in God's name would he have a taser that strong? Like, now I'm just imagining Brit going around Dragon Ball Super and actually dealing damage to people with the taser, when in reality this is more like a JJK Cullen game taser. Maybe he could take on some JJK top tiers. Anyways, just mentioning those examples not because I'm using them here, but someone would probably mention them if I didn't. For all of these, I don't think they're that reliable, and some of them are a little glazy. But overall, Thragg in the comics is still going to be hovering around planetary to large planetary.
Okay.
It's not too different from the show, it's just that he can't be highballed as high. Well, unless you're using a ton of glaze, and you're saying that Check Jacket is actually galaxy level.
That's
but before
crazy.
we move on, let me also introduce you to something we can call the splatter effect. I don't know who actually coined this term or if anyone actually uses it. Someone I know mentioned this name to me, so yeah, let's go with it. In Invincible, when you attack someone stronger than you, more durable than you, you're going to be injuring yourself in the process, i.e., you're going to be splattering yourself. This obviously doesn't happen in real life either. Like, if you punched a brick wall really hard, it's going to hurt like a bitch, but your arm's not going to explode into a red mist. In Invincible, it works like that for some reason. Trust me, it's important that I mention this because it applies to the TV show and the comic, probably even more so to the former. Like, even more mundane action like Debbie punching Nolan, you see this kind of happens to her. But yeah, durability works really weird in Invincible, worth mentioning because it's important for later. Now on to Dragon Ball. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, drop a like or some hype points if you feel like it, because that actually does really help out the video. And I make content like this a lot, so subscribe if you want to see more like that. Let's go to the manga Saiyan Saga. First, talking about speed. This is pretty easy. Since we're scaling the Saiyan Saga, anything during that arc and beforehand is fair game. So we have a lot to work with. This might sound surprising, but manga Dragon Ball is definitely faster than light by the Saiyan Saga. Actually, well beforehand. First off, let's look at Roshi's Kamehameha with the moon. And trust me, we're going to talk more about this later. But when...
Well, let's just talk about how Goku was so fast that he was able to grab a pair of sunglasses to stop the solar flare affecting him as a child. And then we go from there. That's some speed feat from the manga right there. Goddamn. I hope he mentions it.
he launches the Kamehameha at the moon during the 21st World Tournament, the speed at which it reaches the moon would require relativistic speeds. In the anime, the scene's longer, at about 12 seconds from him firing to impact. And I know I'm already referencing the anime while scaling the manga, but this is helpful when we're looking at a scene that's consistent between both stories, because we can actually see this in motion. Now, funny enough, I think the anime makes this scene a little too long. I wouldn't say the beam actually does take that entire 12 seconds. There's clearly some cinematic timing going on here, as we see people's reactions and multiple shots of the blast. Because if that actually took that amount of time, that means Roshi was basically firing the blast for 12 seconds, standing completely still, while Great Ape Goku is just frozen in fear for 12 seconds, not moving. The manga portrays this as urgent and very quick, so I won't fully rely on the anime's timing here. But let's kind of use it as a guide. Let's cut it in half and say this beam took 6 seconds to get from Earth to the moon.
Okay.
I feel like that's reasonable, and is still basing it off the anime's timing. The speed is very easy to calculate here. On average, the moon is 238,855 miles away from Earth. So we take that distance, divide it by 6, then multiply that by 3600, which is the amount of seconds in an hour. That gets us a speed of 143,313,000 miles per hour, which equates to just over 0.21 c, aka about 21% the speed of light.
Right.
Now, this doesn't automatically mean characters are that fast, but it definitely does mean that Ki Blasts are going to be around this speed, at least Ki Blasts that are on this level or above. So anyone that's around Roshi's strength or above him has at least relativistic Ki attacks. This is also supported later on by Piccolo, who pulled off the same exact feat with less effort and in arguably less time, while of course being much stronger than Roshi in the scene, even while not trying. Also, another feat is Goku grabbing Roshi's sunglasses to avoid a solar flare against Tien.
Yo, you mentioned it, yo!
Which would make Goku slightly faster than light, if we take this at face value and say he dodged the solar flare.
Yep.
I used to kind of gloss over this feat because there are some arguments against it, but I've grown to accept it more recently, even if we assume that this is aimed
It's in the official manga. It's, you know, it's canon.
dodging. So one of the big arguments against it is that Goku reacts to Tien starting the attack, and he moves pretty much right when it's executed, which would just be him aim dodging, but still, that's relativistic reactions and combat speed from Goku at worst. And the solar flare should act like light, because Daizenshu actually refers to it as
Yeah.
such. It's not like a ki blast where it could be moving slower. The technique is explained as creating
Light
a light
energy.
source and converting ki into light energy. So this also raises the question of how do faster characters later on get caught by the solar flare? Simple explanation. In the same Daizenshu entry, it says that the more power put into this attack, the stronger the light source. So basically my interpretation of this is that the bottom floor for the solar...
Which then makes sense later in Super when Krillin is able to get Gohan with it even with his eyes closed. That happens, doesn't it? Yeah. And we're in Super, so everyone's like really fucking powerful.
flare is light speed because it'll just behave like light, but it could be faster if used by a stronger person. And I do think this feat is consistent because with the context of what I just said about Roshi's Kamehameha, that doesn't make this feat too crazy. It's pretty straightforward.
Or is it
Roshi has
Goku?
relativistic
Oh, I
ki
can't remember.
blast,
Who does it
Goku
do
supplies
against?
Roshi, and Goku
I think it makes more sense that he does it against Goku. I can't remember. It's against Goku, isn't it? Makes it even more impressive.
dodges a light speed attack that puts him barely faster than light. It would only make him a few times faster than the max power Kamehameha, which isn't a crazy gap. Also, in the same fight, Goku dodges Tien's Kikoho, which is stronger than Roshi's Kamehameha. Even if we're being conservative, Goku's reaction and combat speed here would be like at least 30% light speed with an estimate, but just as I said before, I'm comfortable placing this like right above light speed. And after this, there's not too much for speed feats right up to the Saiyan saga, except for Raditz outrunning and then blocking Goku's Kamehameha, and Goku's much stronger than Roshi here, so this will comfortably put Raditz at faster than light. When launching this attack, Goku's power level was at 924 and rising. If we assume power levels are linear, which they aren't, and I'll get into that later, that would mean Goku here is over 5 times stronger than Roshi, assuming Roshi's max power level is 180. But his power level could be even lower, at 139, which is what it's listed at in the 22nd World Tournament. So this could mean Goku's at least 7 times stronger than Roshi here, meaning this attack would be around 1.5 times the speed of light. And that's still fairly conservative. Like I mentioned too, you'll see later on in this video that power levels aren't so reliable because they're not linear. A power level of 200 is not simply 2 times stronger than a power level of 100. So we can't simply calculate speed with power levels, but they act as good lowball estimates that we could use later. So for example, someone with a power level of 200 is at least 2 times faster than someone with a power level of 100,
Okay.
at the bare minimum, which gives us a good idea of how to estimate beyond that. Oh yeah, another funny feat, Yamcha dodges a laser in Chapter 11, which is so crazy because Daizenshu actually refers to this laser as being light, so I guess if you really want to highball it, yeah, Yamcha's faster than light in the early chapters, man, whatever, sure, why not? Someone might also mention Goku going to the moon with the power pole, but that speed more so applies to the power pole than Goku. Okay, I think I've covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, fair, okay.
In terms of speed feats. Of the people who fight in the Saiyan saga, the lowest recorded power level is Yamcha at 177, right after Raditz shows up. The highest recorded power level in the Saiyan saga is Vegeta at 180,000, although it's probably going to be a little lower than that since he used some energy to create the artificial moon. Goku also maxes out at 32,000 with Kaioken times 4, and the highest base power is Vegeta at 18,000.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea of the ranges we're working with, because while Thragg is always compared to this saga, it takes place over the course of a year with a training time skip in between. So, for the sake of simplicity in this video, when I refer to the pre- and post-training parts of this saga, I'll refer to it as the Raditz saga or the Vegeta
Or the
saga.
Vegeta, right,
Pretty
okay, that makes sense.
self-explanatory. Even if we
Okay.
rank Dragon Ball speed, Thragg's top speed far outspeeds them. Or so you may think. We'll cover this in the fight later. Now, to move on to power. To scale the Saiyan saga, let's go all the way back to the 21st
I think it's the
World
build-up.
Tournament.
Like I said, they're faster in space because they can fly for ages, and this was covered in Easy's thing as well. It's like they build up momentum, and that gives them the speed. They don't have the initial, like, fwah! Whereas I feel like Dragon Ball characters are more consistent with their speed. They're like, that is exactly how they're going to be throughout the whole fight. They don't need to, like, build it up before going. Thragg needs to, like, kind of wind himself up.
Again, Roshi blows up the moon at full power. I remember there used to be some debate about whether or not this was an outlier, but I think that's long since died out, and I don't want to spend more time on this feat than I already am going to, because I'm going to spend a lot of time on it. There's a bit to cover with it. This feat not only isn't an outlier, but it's made consistent retroactively later on with Piccolo destroying the moon. because again, he's stronger than Roshi by at least 2 times, and he does this with far less effort, with a normal, unnamed Ki Blast, launched with one hand, and basically no buildup.
Man, it's
His
called Get
power level
Lost.
is 329 while weighted, while Roshi's power level was as low as 129 or as high as 180. And again, power levels don't scale linearly, so Piccolo might even be stronger than that 2 times figure I gave. A very simple example to show how power levels aren't linear is if we take the farmer's power level at the beginning of the Raditz saga. His power level was 5. In Chapter 1 of the manga, Goku's power level is 10. Goku is very clearly more than 2 times stronger than this normal person. And by the way, most of the power levels I'm referencing here either come from Daizenshuu 7 or the series itself. I'm not drawing from any other sources beyond those two. The reason I give a range for Roshi is because against Tien his power level is 139, and he stated that he had been secretly training prior to this tournament, because the King Piccolo saga, which happens right after this tournament, has Roshi listed at 180. But of course, the moon-busting feat took place in the 21st World Tournament, which was years before this, so this means Roshi's max power Kamehameha that destroyed the moon likely didn't go any higher than 180 at maximum, and it's more likely on the lower end, like around that 139 figure. Raditz's power level is 1500. It's numerically around 5 times of Piccolo when he destroyed the moon, or over 8 times Roshi when he destroyed the moon. And given how power levels work, you can't just rely on the numerical increase. A difference of 8 times is probably even stronger than that. Like, let's be conservative and add a 2 times multiplier on here to account for it being non-linear.
Okay.
This could be higher or lower, but just to use it as a guesstimate here. That would mean Raditz is more like 16 times stronger than a Moonbuster. So, he could destroy 16 moons. Oh, wait a second, no, there's actually more. Roshi's feat wasn't a moon-busting feat. Yeah, he destroyed the moon, but that doesn't mean he only used moon-busting power to destroy it.
Okay.
A moon-busting attack and a planet-busting attack can both destroy a moon.
Yeah.
One just does it more violently
Right.
and efficiently than the other. And Roshi's on the latter end of that. He destroyed the moon with so much force that it shattered it.
It's the exact same thing he said before with like Frieza's little thing where it's like, boom, you destroyed a planet, but it doesn't mean it's planetary. Yeah.
Small pieces that were flying towards Earth at insane speeds. Using a calculation from Crim 3322 here, the low end of this feat would be moon level, obviously, but looking at the speed of the debris, and assuming that it travels the distance of the moon's radius in those few seconds, it would require planet-busting power. Again, you
Right.
could argue that you don't really want to use an anime scene for the manga here, which is fine, but keep that in the back of your mind when we cover the anime later. But also, in the scene in the manga, we could see that the moon is completely gone there. There's not a moon in the sky, slowly breaking apart, there's not some space dust, there's not some pieces of it left floating through space. No, it's just completely gone. So the feat was still that extreme there. Roshi didn't simply destroy the moon. He violently
eradicated
to
it.
the point where you can't even see it anymore. Likely meaning that Roshi destroyed the moon with planetary level power. And Piccolo's moon-busting feat later on is the same thing.
Interesting.
Of course, more casual, but when he does this feat, he also completely destroys the moon, causing it to fly down towards Earth in small chunks, with nothing left behind. Also, later on, King Piccolo says he could destroy the entire world if he wanted to. This one's a bit more dubious, and you can interpret this in different ways, but combined with the stuff that I just mentioned, it's pretty reasonable to assume that he's being literal here. Okay, but what about that one statement that
He
says...
said world, not planet. So, kind of means something different, I guess. Like, if I'll destroy this world, it's like everything's dead. Not like the whole physical thing is just eradicated. Do you know what I mean? Removed from existence. Could have been translated differently. I don't know.
You need a power level of 10,000 to destroy a planet. That would mean no one in the Saiyan Saga can destroy a planet besides Goku and Vegeta. Well, that entire statement's wrong. Or at least, people interpret it the complete wrong way. If you know me, I don't like solely relying on guides in general if their statements aren't consistent with the story. But this statement comes from El Manga Legendario. It's a guide made in affiliation with Bird Studio, which is Toriyama's studio, and this gives a bunch of info about Dragon Ball. So, involvement from Toriyama's studio here makes me want to believe it more. So why don't I agree with the quote? Well, I'm about to blow your mind. Here's a translation of the quote. How much did Piccolo's power level increase after fusing with Nail? There's no doubt it was so great that the scouters couldn't calculate it. If what he says is true, Frieza's second form has a power level beyond 1 million, and Piccolo may have surpassed that amount. If a power of 10,000 can destroy a planet, it's inconceivable what a power level of 1 million can achieve. So, translated literally, it says, if with a combat power of 10,000 one can destroy a planet, and so on. Emphasis on the word can. And in the Spanish statement, it uses puede, which comes from the verb poder, which in English essentially means to be able to and indicates capability. It does not suggest a minimum or barrier of entry.
Ooh.
This verb is also used in the second half of that same sentence when asking what a power level of 1 million can achieve. Can only proves that a power of 10,000 is capable of
Capable of
destroying
doing
a planet,
it, right?
not that it's a minimum. especially in the context of
Ooh,
the
so
statement.
potentially
It's
someone with a
being
lower
used for the
power
sake
level
of
could
comparing
also do the
10,000 to 1
same.
million, rather than setting a bar of what counts as
Whoa!
planetary. It's like the pancakes and waffles tweet. People are changing the quote and adding context that's not there, or just removing the context that is there. Granted, it's probably a big game of telephone. The quote's in Spanish, and people just take other opinions at face value. And if you can't read Spanish and someone tells you that it says this, you'll just probably take it as that. But still, it's kind of weird to me because Dragon Ball has a ton of Spanish-speaking fans, and Spanish is a lot easier to translate to English than, like, Japanese, for example.
Ooh,
And the meaning here
yes.
is pretty clear. So I'm not sure why people run with this as the explanation for the quote, and no one's ever bothered to really check it that much. Well, I've seen some people agree with what I said, but most people just run with the explanation that this is setting a bare minimum. And fun fact, unlike Japanese, I am actually mostly literate in Spanish too, so I'm not just using some
Nice.
translator for this. I translated that myself, and it's a language that doesn't have as many nuances that carry over like Japanese does. I also double checked this with a few friends to make sure that I wasn't getting anything wrong. There is no way you can interpret this differently. It very solidly states that this is just a frame of reference, especially with the context of Piccolo's power level being compared to Frieza. Nowhere does it confirm or even imply that 10k is a minimum. Removing the context and changing the wording is just wrong. So yes, I agree with this quote. A power level of 10,000 can destroy a planet, but it's not a minimum. Plus, another thing worth mentioning is that even if this was referring to a minimum requirement, it just says this is what is needed to destroy a planet. But does this mean just like any planet in general? Does this mean like the lowest of low in terms of the smallest planet? Or is it just talking about an average planet? Because remember, Earth in Dragon Ball is not average.
It's
Earth is
bigger,
referred
isn't
to
it?
as a small planet by King Cold, so what we consider as planetary in the real world is small planetary to them. There are a bunch of more massive planets in Dragon Ball, like for example,
Yeah, like, well, isn't Earth in Dragon Ball bigger than yeah, real life? Isn't it?
Planet Vegeta or Planet Zune, both of which have 10 times the gravity of Earth. So even if you twist this line to say that 10,000 is a baseline, it's just saying a planet. That's a wide range. It could be referring to an average planet. It could be referring to a tiny planet like Mercury, or, since this was before 2006, it could even be referring to like Pluto. It could even be referring to all planets in general. Like, if you have a power level of 10,000, you could destroy any planet regardless of size. But again, that's all
Excuse
irrelevant because the
me.
quote doesn't say any of that. Sorry for the tangent. I just think that whole quote is a really bad argument, and in short, the 10,000 power level requirement doesn't exist. Earth is a relatively small planet by Dragon Ball standards, so there's even less of a barrier entry to destroy it. Also, building upon that King Piccolo statement I mentioned, Kami also reaffirms this and says that Piccolo Jr. can destroy the world.
Ah, go back. I need to see that quote.
Destroy any planet regardless of size. But again, that's all irrelevant because the quote doesn't say any of that. Sorry for the tangent. I just think that whole quote is a really bad argument. And in
Fine.
short,
Just get
the
to the. I
10,000
wish I
power
could
level requirement doesn't exist.
skim
Earth is a relatively
through
small planet by Dragon Ball standards, so there's even less of a barrier
less
entry to destroy it.
seconds.
Also, building upon that King
Here we
Piccolo
go. Here we
statement
go.
I mentioned, Kami
Right. Sorry to disappoint you. In the instant before he exploded, he left behind, showed himself a spore, a clone. Even more power stored with him than the original. Wait, where does that say he could destroy the world? Conquering the world? Still no. Doesn't say he could blow up the planet. Oh, okay.
also reaffirms this and says that Piccolo Jr. can destroy the world. Funny enough, in the anime, King Piccolo says he could destroy the world in a heartbeat. Later, right after Raditz dies, Piccolo says that Gohan as a Great Ape can destroy the planet. And we don't know his exact power level as a Great Ape, but again, this tracks and this puts a bare minimum of him being planetary here. Also, way later on in the Buu saga, Shin is talking about how Buu is able to destroy hundreds of planets. Vegeta thinks to himself that Saiyans were able to do that too, reaffirming that Saiyans had planetary level power and were able to destroy planets. And he's definitely
Ooh,
referring
yeah,
to
before power levels became that strong. Oh, okay, yeah, alright.
the Saiyans in a historical context.
But then. He could also be talking about the fact that you're literally throwing this in. All these great apes are there and destroying everything together. Like in groups. But okay.
Not just the ones present with.
I don't. Well, watch these. I don't like to just agree with absolutely everything. I'm hoping this is still going in the direction that Thragg would not win, but there's still certain things here that I don't agree with in. Yeah, whatever.
Right now, because Shin follows up by mentioning Frieza's power right after. If Vegeta was referring to the Saiyans that were around him at that very moment, bringing Frieza up wouldn't matter in that context. The Galactic Patrol also has a missile that can destroy planets, but Jocko says they can't do anything against Saiyans, meaning they should be planetary in durability and power too. It's funny, this is literally the same exact argument as the Sun Disk feat, because some galactic organization with really strong weapons can't kill the genocidal planet conquerors with those weapons. All of that is to say, this is comfortably putting Dragon Ball at planetary even before the Saiyan saga, so this means anyone above Roshi is planetary, and even in the Raditz saga, we have plenty of characters above him.
Okay.
Like, let's put a list of power levels on screen here in the Raditz saga. And we could also put a list of power levels for the Vegeta saga, where they're much higher. So, even the weakest Vegeta saga character, Chaozu, is multiple times stronger than 21st World Tournament Roshi. He also has telekinesis too, and the weakest Raditz saga character is a literal toddler. But even then, he can mog everyone when he gets really mad.
Yeah.
What about the anime, though? As you may or may not already know,
here we go.
Toei's anime scaling is fucked compared to the normal manga scaling. I made a video on my main Dragon Ball channel about how Toei's continuity connects
Solid
everything,
Saiyan.
and how it just messes up the story as a whole.
Ooh.
But how does that apply to the Saiyan saga and power scaling in general? Well, let me tell you how. It's through our pal Garlic Jr. Garlic Jr. helps to upscale everything, and no, that's not a joke. On top of everything I said before about Roshi being planetary, everyone in Toei is just generally stronger by default. For Garlic Jr., he compares to Raditz Saga Goku and Piccolo in base, and then he grows multiple times stronger in his super form. Obviously, the story doesn't take place in the manga, but it is blatantly canon to the anime, as
Yeah.
Garlic Jr. reappeared in his own saga
Yeah, like if we didn't have the, if we didn't have that little bit in between the Frieza saga and Cell, yeah, but
later. So, whether you think the movies are canon to Dragon Ball's anime or not, Garlic Jr.
Garlic
is
Jr. is.
undeniably part of the anime canon.
yeah,
Basically, this serves to upscale all the Raditz Saga characters, particularly Raditz and beyond. This movie's actually not too long before Raditz arrives, but Raditz himself scales just above Super Garlic Jr. One of the promo materials for Tree of Might actually lists Garlic Jr.'s power level at 1450, which obviously this source isn't as reliable as some of the other ones I've been mentioning here, but then it also lists Raditz at 1500, which is also consistent with how Daizenshuu 7 lists him. And Super Garlic Jr. does something really interesting. He creates and has control over the Dead Zone. This is described multiple times over as a black hole, and it's specifically stated to be created through Garlic's heightened ki. This is something made by actual power. While this upscaled the anime significantly, it's also not inconsistent with anything prior or after. At the low end, creating a black hole of this size would mean Garlic Jr. is far beyond planetary. Not quite star level. He'd be comfortably placed around the brown dwarf level. In case you're not familiar, brown dwarfs are gaseous objects, larger than a huge planet like Jupiter, but smaller than the smallest actual stars. They're essentially failed stars, just to give you an idea of the scale.
they tried.
So, obviously, this upscales everything after him. Raditz was slightly stronger than Super Garlic Jr., and he also did a little better against Goku and Piccolo in fighting, too. So, by default, this puts Raditz at Brown Dwarf level, and then, of course, he has Great Ape, which can multiply him times 10, which will push him into the small star range. The funny thing is, in Great Ape, Raditz is still surpassed by Vegeta's base strength, so it serves to upscale Vegeta, and also just Goku in the Vegeta saga as well. Speaking of Vegeta, there's also a short scene of King Vegeta destroying 3 planets by simply waving his hand. This is a bit more debatable because King Kai is recounting what the Saiyans are like, and some people argue that the scene might have just been metaphorical. But also, he blows up the planet he's standing on, which would make him die in space, so I don't know how reliable that is, but that could easily be explained as
I never
the
really
anime
thought
staff
about
didn't
that,
know
actually.
Saiyans couldn't breathe in space by that point.
I
The
didn't
scene
think
does
about
depict
that.
it pretty literally, though.
That
Like,
is
you see
interesting.
the explosion happen on the planet as all the planets blow up.
Although,
Frank-
who's to say it's the planet he's on? I mean, it's doing the energy blast and everything like that, but who's to say it's actually aimed at the planet he's on? He could just be like, haha, release, and then he's like, let's say he's on a planet that's not on the screen. Take that, bitch.
I believe the scene is valid to use, and again, it's consistent with prior scaling. Roshi's planetary, Garlic Jr.'s brown dwarf level, and King Vegeta with this feat would be around small star level, which is pretty much
He's
the
just
estimate I
powering
gave
up
before with
to
Raditz's
blow up the other
power,
planets around
considering
him.
King
Yeah,
Vegeta's at a
fuck
power
you.
level of 10,000, which, assuming a linear increase, would mean he's over 6 times stronger than Garlic Jr. And on top of that, there's also the scene of Vegeta destroying a planet with one finger. He has enough power to vaporize the entire planet and its moon. This feat can actually be calced to star level.
From
And again,
space?
he did this casually, with one finger. So at
From space! We're saying King Vegeta couldn't do that because we didn't know Saiyans could breathe in space. But then Vegeta and Nappa are doing this breathing in space.
bare minimum, Vegeta in base in the anime is
In
10
space!
Starbuster. So he's likely more in the range of large star level.
He's
than
outside his
Sirius,
ship.
and even higher into the large star tier when he's a greatest. Garlic Jr. sets a nice bar too, because
Funny.
that's also going to place a lot of the Z fighters into brown dwarf level, even some of them pushing small star tier. Because outside of Chaozu,
He's talking
and
as well. It's not like he's
in the
holding his
Vegeta
breath
saga,
like the
all the other
Viltrumites.
Z fighters are above him, some by a significant margin. So Dragon Ball will inevitably outscale Thragg. It's just a matter of when, and also which continuity we're using. So let's go to the actual fights. First, let's talk about speed. Does Thragg just speed blitz them? Well, as mentioned
No.
before, Thragg won't go massively faster than light speeds on Earth. His reaction speeds will still be pretty high because that wouldn't be limited by being on Earth, unless Invincible's plot demands it, in which case, Viltrumites are getting tagged by much slower people. But ignoring that here. His travel speeds won't nearly be as high, though that's not going to be as relevant. In actual combat speed, though, that's going to make a big difference. This will affect how fast he's able to maneuver and deliver attacks. And he might actually get outsped because of that. So it's an interesting dynamic. His reactions and perceptions will be far higher, but his movement will be restricted on Earth.
He needs to wind up. Like I said, like he's just shown, and this was something I mentioned in Easy's thing where he was explaining it, and he didn't mention it, but I feel like that single shot of Thragg punching Nolan in the face shows how slow they are compared to Dragon Ball Z characters. Like, he isn't instantaneously punching him. He's winding it up for the punch. No Dragon Ball Z character has to do that in any kind of, it's instant punch. It's not bam. It's bam. You know what I mean?
As we've seen many times before. Not because he's avoiding destroying everything around him, but because of the natural resistances he faces by being on a planet. At best, he'll pretty much be around the same level as the fighters here. At worst, he'll be surpassed by a little bit. Not a significant amount, but he's not even going to really blitz them. Speaking of that, can't he just destroy Earth? Yeah, he could, but that causes two problems. First, his opponents won't just let him do that, obviously.
Yeah.
He'd be stopped before leaving or stopped upon re-entry. Second, he wouldn't resort to that immediately. For what it's worth, that is a win condition, but I don't know if it would happen here. I guess in the scenario of the battle, if he's just out for blood, and he wants everyone dead, he could just start by doing that before he even gets to Earth. Just launch right into the planet from outer space, and then that's that. But if the battle starts on the planet, or he wants the planet to stick around for some reason, in those scenarios, he's not going to resort to that immediately, and he probably wouldn't even be able to do that. And remember I mentioned the splatter effect?
Yeah.
Well, even if he could speed blitz here, it wouldn't matter. If Thragg flies into someone stronger than him at his top speeds, he'll just explode into like a giant red mist. So if anything, he'd be the one defeating himself. And on some Z fighters this might work, but once you're getting to the higher tiers, yeah, Thragg is just going to get gibbed like a TF2 character. And of course, yeah, he could blow up Earth or drag someone into space, but the former is incredibly tough against either version of Dragon Ball, and the latter is even worse. Like, even if he grabbed the weakest fighter, let's say he gets Gohan or something.
Okay.
Gohan gets enraged and Thragg dies like King Piccolo with a hole in his chest. Or try it with someone like Chaozu. Even manga Chaozu would kill him. Chaozu paralyzes him before he even gets to space, and then hits him with a large planetary attack, either significantly injuring Thragg or killing him outright. Even if we lowball Chaozu and highball Thragg, well, worst case, Chaozu blows himself up and succeeds in killing Thragg. Then he's just brought back to life later. And that's if he fights him one-on-one. Having everyone here is overkill, and the reason I'm doing Thragg against the entire Saiyan saga is because this is what I'm seeing people put him up against. Like, it's so overkill. Genuinely, Chaozu versus Thragg would be a much more interesting battle because they'd at least be kind of relative. Even if it's just Goku and Piccolo from a year prior in the Raditz saga, fighting him like they did against Raditz, that would be a more interesting fight too, and they'd probably still win there. It wouldn't necessarily be easy, but it would be easier than fighting Raditz. And God forbid Thragg fights Raditz himself. He's the weakest of Vegeta's crew, but he'll actually get a nice kill that day. This is all for the manga, by the way. If we're taking the Toei version, then it's not even comparable. Plus, no matter which version you choose, Thragg is outmatched in abilities. I like some of Thragg's powers, but what the fuck does he know about special abilities? Dragon Ball characters have various things like Ki Blast, various forms of telekinesis, paralysis, lightning manipulation, fire manipulation, etc., etc. Hell, some of them can even seal people away.
Yeah.
Thragg has space survival and really slow regeneration, which
and can hold his breath
Piccolo
for a
beats him
very
in the
long
regeneration
time.
field. And he has really fast travel, but none of his other Viltrumite attributes actively help him in combat compared to what Ki offers. That's not to say he doesn't have special
It's a wind
abilities, like,
up. He's
obviously
winding
he
it
does.
up. It's
It's
not
just that most of the
fast
stuff he has is passive,
compared
and he doesn't
to
have
Dragon
some
Ball.
special offensive ability he could use. However, I will say that if you use the manga Dragon Ball's low ball and compare it to Thragg's low ball, Thragg actually comes out ahead, both in speed and in power. So, in that sense, he could win. Thragg's floor of power is higher than their floor of power. It's just that his ceiling is lower than their ceiling, and pretty much everything in between would be lower too. But even at his low ball, if we structure things like a gauntlet and just had him going 1v1 against everyone, he's going to be losing eventually when he gets to the high tiers, because even low-balled Vegeta and Goku, they'd stand a fair chance, not even considering the fact that Vegeta can go Grade 8,
Grade
but
8,
Goku
yeah,
has a Spirit
whoa,
Bomb and
whoa.
other techniques he can use to make himself stronger like Kaioken. So yeah, Thragg's low balls are higher than Dragon Ball's low balls. If we're conservative for both series, Thragg is no less than planetary, while only Goku and Vegeta are planetary at the absolute low ball. Because whatever you think about Dragon Ball's power at this point, it's undeniable that Vegeta is a planet buster. So he would set the bar. However, Dragon Ball's
The
averages are
salad
arguably higher
bar.
than Thragg's
I
averages.
loved how he did that in the. The guy's got humor, man. He's had some funny moments in this video. This has been great. But yeah, I'm glad we're on this. Like, I can't believe Seth put that video out with Chuck, man. Like, what the fuck?
Speed, and for high balls, Thragg's high balls will surpass a good portion of the Saiyan saga, but again, he'd still end up losing to higher tiers. Though, if you really want to wank Dragon Ball, one thing that I didn't touch upon in this video is that apparently you could even scale Kami to Dwarf Star level because he recreated the moon from scratch, and the amount of energy to do that would be like a Dwarf Star level feat. Which, if you take that at face value, he's going to severely upscale everyone else.
That is so funny.
Which is even funnier because Garlic Jr. in base low-diffed Kami.
Yeah.
So that would make Garlic Jr. even stronger than him,
Oh,
and then once
that's
Garlic
so
Jr. is
good.
upscaling everyone, he's really the missing piece here. So it's not a complete loss for Thragg. There are some instances where he will win. The odds are stacked against him, though, but don't blame me for placing him against the entire Saiyan saga. I'm just basing him off of whatever battles people want on Twitter. But let me know what you think below. This was a really long-winded video, but I hope it was in-depth and I hope you enjoyed it. Oh yeah, be civil in the comments too. I know how power scaling videos get. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.
Nice. That was good. That was a very good video. It's just weird, isn't it? Like when you scale these things, they feel the need to do the whole low ball thing and go, oh, they never like 100% go in and go, this verse wins entirely. It's like they've got to give them some sort of chance. But yeah, Dragon Ball just beats. I don't understand why Seth did that video with Chuck, and then Easy's video was great, and then this just like kind of doubles down on it as well. Brilliant. Pixel scaling's bullshit, and just yeah, some interesting points as well. I wasn't arguing with Salad Bar at certain points. It's just things were mentioned. Like, they're saying how if King Vegeta had blown up the planet, Saiyans couldn't breathe in space. But then, like, Vegeta's literally in space. And he uses the example of him blowing up a planet, like, talking. And he's talking to Nappa as well in that clip. So he's literally breathing in space. But, yeah, whatever. I like to have fun with these as well. So, yeah, that was great. I got another one from Salad Bar I want to check out, which is because I remember checking out his what characters could survive the Hunter exams in Hunter x Hunter. So he's done a what other characters could survive. And if you guys got anything else you want to check out from the guy, let me know. Thanks for watching.